Hello, I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts. I hope you are well. And I wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah. Whatever faith you have, this is a special time of year for everyone. And I think we get lost in the kind of the busyness of the season, if you will, and don't take time to think about what's what's the reason for the season, so to speak. And so I just really hope that you keep that in mind and enjoy this time with your family, because it's just such a marvelous time of year, and it can be even more wonderful when we take time to enjoy it. So today I wanted to talk to you about something. Everybody talks about, oh, you should feed this, and this is the best brand of food, and you should feed raw, and you should feed cooked, and this and that and the other. And now grain-free food is the very best thing in the universe, and now grain-free food is evil incarnate. And what in the world is going on? So there's a couple of things I want you to think about. What I'm going to do is start with food labels, because this is where much of the confusion comes in. So if we think about, we're used to looking at pet food labels and looking at ingredients and things of that nature. But if we compare that to a human nutrition label, and let's take a look at one of those. So here's the Atkins diet's one of the sort of prepared frozen foods. And it's telling you, and they're taking kind of a keto approach to things. So they're telling you there's 22 grams of protein, 3 grams of sugar, 4 grams of fiber, and 310 calories. And that means there's 7 grams of net carbs, which is interesting, but there you go. So let's take a look at the full nutritional information. And here is this list of ingredients. In human products and in pet products, ingredients are listed by the amount of volume or weight they take up in the recipe. So they've got cauliflower and all this good stuff, and they've got some other kind of stuff to make this hold together, xanthan gums, unsalted butter, all sorts of soy sauce, all that good stuff. So there's all the ingredients. And what you'll notice is they're not adding in supplements. They're not adding in specific nutrients like vitamin B or C or what have you. So when we look at this nutrition facts that's on every human meal or food that you pick up, so even water has this on there, and it has 0 for everything, right? So it tells you how many, what the serving size is, first of all, and this was hugely misleading for a while. So one bowl, 255 grams, gives you 310 calories, and the government still believes that fat is evil incarnate, and almost more than half of that actually is fat. And so they're telling you down below what's the percentage of the daily value, what's our RDA, our required daily allowance, although they're shifting away from that as well. So they're telling you that this has 31% of the total amount of fat that you should eat for a day. There's 20 grams of fat total. How much is saturated fat? Trans fat is supposed to be out of all human food at this point. And there's cholesterol, there's sodium, how much carbohydrate, and you'll see carbohydrates broken down into fiber. So 4 gram, this is what feeds your bugs. Sugar, 3 gram, is what you can actually process, and then 22 grams of protein, and that's 38% of your RDA, so to speak. And here's a few other nutrients it's got in there, some vitamin A, calcium, and vitamin C. And then it tells you, okay, this is out of a 2,000 calorie day, this is how much you should be eating, right? So that's pretty simple to understand. And over time, that's what the government has actually done a good job, is to make these nutrition facts actually be something that you and I can pick up and look at, and boom, you get the picture pretty quick. So let's contrast that with pet food. So here's Akana, which is considered to be an excellent brand of food, and I think it is, as far as all of the nutrients that are put in there. So, and this is where it gets so bloody confusing in dog food. So we've got this split up into a couple of different things. So here's deboned, here's our meat math. So they tell you, how to understand what's actually meat and all of that good stuff and blah, blah, blah. So here's ingredients, and it tells you exactly what's in it. And you'll notice here that, so there's the turkey, the chicken meal, oatmeal, sorghum, millet, catfish meal, all this stuff. And this is part of what I don't like about much of the pet food industry, is that they tend to not give you a single protein. And so it makes it really difficult to rotate things. So you've got all this kind of stuff going on there. This one is a grain-free version, or excuse me, it's not a grain-free version. We've got oats and a grass and things of that nature. So whole pumpkin, salt, and then up to here is where it's the food, chlorine, and there's a couple of other bits and pieces. But the rest of this is the nutrients that they're adding in to make it complete and balanced for all life stages. So that's what all of this is. So vitamin E mixed tocopherols as a preservative, zinc, taurine, D3, blah, 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 blah. So here's all this stuff. And then, all right, that's great. That looks pretty good as far as ingredients go. And then we pop over to analysis, and this is what we get. And they're telling you, Akana, is that this has more meat in it than most pet foods because they believe this is what is appropriate for dogs, and so do I. So, here we are, 27% protein, 17% fat, and then 6% fiber. Okay, well, how much carbohydrate does this have, and what's the sugar that we're getting out of here? And so here's dietary starch, max 30%. And this is where it gets super confusing. So this is all on a dry food basis. Here's 2% sugars. And again, notice all of these are listed as percentages. So why is that? Why is this? This is really confusing, right? So why do they have it listed like that? And the reason is the NRC is the group, the National Research Council is the group that provides the nutrient requirements for adult dogs and cats. And so there's different ones for puppies, kittens, and then there's an all life stages one. And these are a bit more detailed than what AAFCO uses, although I think they've finally gotten to where they're using these. So what the NRC wanted to make sure of is that each of these amino acids, the values were published as a requirement. And these amino acids are ones that are considered to be essential amino acids, meaning that the animal or the person has to eat them in order to get sufficient quantities of them. Now again, these are the dog requirements, and these have not really been updated since '06. And you will notice that there is no taurine on here, right? Because as long as dogs are eating adequate amounts of protein and these specific amino acids, they should be able to, to have enough to eat. So, all right, so there's the amino acids. Okay, here's linoleic acid and omega-3 fatty acids, and then here's the minerals. Now here's another thing I want you to notice too. They have down here minimum, maximum, and recommended allowance. And so maximum, in the case of linoleic acid and things of that nature, is going to be to prevent imbalances. So this is where it gets super interesting, right? So here's calcium, minimum 0.5, phosphorus maximum 0.5. Here's the recommendation, 1. What? And then the phosphorus is 0.75 is the recommended amount, but the maximum recommended is 0.5. What? What is that? What does that mean? Now, here's the other thing that is super tricky. So the nutrient amount is per 1,000 calories of food. So we're not actually looking at it on, and it gets difficult because of the weight range in dogs, not so much in cats, but we're looking at the nutrients that are required to balance 1,000 calories of food, not what the pet needs. So this gets super confusing. So we'll just kind of scroll through here and look at the rest of these. Some of these, they have minimums, maximums, and this is from the Merck Veterinary Manual, but if you download the information from the NRC itself, it is just as confusing, and they don't make it very clear that this is on a 1,000-calorie basis. So, golly, so maximum 16,000 retinol equivalents of vitamin A, but just put 379. So, I mean, this is the interesting thing. We don't know what the minimum and maximum is. So cholecalciferol is vitamin D3. We know now that the maximum amount is 20, and beyond that we start creating calcium stones in the kidneys and other places and really creating an issue. But we don't know what the minimum is, so they're taking a guess and saying this is the recommended allowance. So same thing here, here's all the recommendations, and that's kind of it. So I'll put a link to this in the comments, or actually in the YouTube description once this is up in Atom. But this is why it's so bloody confusing. So I want to look at a couple of other types of food as well with you. So here's Just Food for Dogs, and this is a company that's been making pet food in their storefronts, and they've worked out a deal with Petco to where they can, I guess this is irradiated. I don't know how it's preserved. But basically, here's a meal in a box. Here's a case of 12 and a half ounce somehow preserved meals for your dog. Now, here, same thing. Let's take a look at our details. So the same thing. Here's your ingredients. There's all of the supplements that are added into the food to make it come up to those NRC requirements, and then how it's split out as far as fiber and things of that nature. Same thing with Blue Buffalo. Here's our ingredient list, and again, there's all of the actual food, and then the vast majority of it is the other stuff they add in to balance the diet. Here's the guaranteed analysis. So again, they tell you all of the percentages. And then they do tell you is not recognized as an essential nutrient by AAFCO dog food nutrient profiles, but they think you should know about them, and indeed the NRC does say you should actually kind of have that balanced out. And then here's your feeding guidelines. So this is where so how do you know that these diets are complete and balanced? And you don't, except for that the manufacturer tells you that these are complete and balanced for all life stages, which God knows where this is. And they don't even say it on the front of the bag. It's buried down somewhere in the on the back. So you don't know that these are complete and balanced. So it tells you, okay, for up to 10 pounds, you're going to feed somewhere between 3/4 and a whole cup for an adult dog, and then more for a growing puppy, which makes sense. What if you have a really, really sedentary dog and it just lays around on the sofa? So for instance, Mona is 15 working on 16. She'll be 16 in July. And she doesn't, we get her up and move her, but she sleeps a lot. So does she need a whole cup of food? And I would argue that no, she doesn't. And in fact, based on a caloric basis, she should be eating about 250 calories a day. Sort of a good rule of thumb is 25 calories per pound of body weight. But I find that that's actually often way too much. So I'll kind of come back to that idea in a second. And one more thing to look at is Darwin's Biologics Raw Food. So again, here it is. Here's your list of ingredients, how much, and they put in here what the percentage of all of these foods are, and then how to feed them and all that good stuff. So they tell you kind of what's in there. But this is so confusing, and I got to tell you, it took me a long time to figure out what does all of this mean? And I'm a veterinarian. They supposedly taught me nutrition, but basically what I've learned is, don't worry about it, the pet food manufacturers have got it. So when I was going back and kind of answering some questions for people on the Crockpet diet, like why do we only add this much calcium? It says, other places say to add this much, and it turns out that no, that you really shouldn't, because that's going to overdose the calcium and potentially create some issues. And then also I'm in process of reformulating, actually I've reformulated Holistic Total Body Support, and I am very pleased to tell you that it will be back on our shelves, so to speak, by mid to end February. Then I'll talk a little bit more about that. But here's the deal. So how do you know how much your pet is getting? And how do you know that it's enough? So that's the big question. So we've got in the pet food labels are profoundly confusing. And then, what if your pet's sick? Is that enough nutrients? And I would argue no. The other thing that's not super clear in all of these pet food labels or in the manufacturing process is, when do they measure the amount of nutrients that have been put into food? And that is a big issue. So for many years, the AAFCO folks allowed their pet food manufacturers to measure the nutrients when they were added to the food before processing. So mind you, for most kibble, that is going into this stuff, this mix of goo, is going into a heat extruder, which is going to destroy many of the B vitamins and things of that nature. And I think that most manufacturers now are spraying many of the vitamins on with a flavoring agent. It's like, that's why you can't eat just one Lay's later, as the food is cooling. So I think the vitamin content is closer to what it says it should be, according to the NRC or AAFCO. But you don't really know that for sure. And then how long did that bag of food sit around? Blah, 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 blah. Is it 6 months? Is it 8 months? Is it 2 months? You don't know. There's ways to look at their codes, and they don't put expiration dates or production dates cleanly on the bags. You have to know that each manufacturer's little secret code to know when this food was produced. So why am I telling you all of this? This is my whole reason for having developed the Crockpet diet to start with. One is, most of these foods are extremely high in carbohydrates. And as many people have pointed out with the grain-free diets, this was like a huge fad. All of a sudden, grains were evil and awful, and they caused all of these horrible diseases and blah, 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 blah. And that's true if you react to them, if your pet reacts to them. But you shouldn't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. So then we started feeding these grain-free foods, and they're 70% beans. Well, beans happen to contain anti-nutrients called lectins. And even though they're processed properly, if they're just way, way, way too high, then they're going to inhibit the absorption of nutrients that you need. And so even though beans are high in protein, dogs, and mostly golden retrievers, but some other breeds as well, develop dilative cardiomyopathy because they weren't getting adequate amino acids into their systems to produce enough taurine to keep their hearts happy. That's ludicrous. So here's what I'm going to recommend to you. It doesn't matter what you feed if you feed it consistently. I'm going to suggest to you that feeding real unprocessed food is a much, 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 much better option. I mean, same thing with the Atkins, frozen dinners. That's some gnarly stuff in there. If you feed what you have gone to the grocery store and purchased, whether that's fresh vegetables or frozen, however you need to do it, you know exactly what's in your diet. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is, if you look at the list of ingredients in the Crockpet diet, that looks pretty darn good. You've got your meat, you've got some healthy fats, you've got a lot of vegetables. But when I knew I was close, but I wasn't exactly sure that I was dead on, and I was recommending to use some sort of a nutritional supplement along with it. So when the veterinary nutritionist balanced the diet according to the NRC standards, I was really close, but not quite. So the calcium was off slightly, so we have to add a little bit more. And a couple of other things as far as the micronutrients, copper, iron, things of that nature were slightly low, so we need to add a little bit more. And that's what I would suggest to you with, again, regardless of what you're feeding. If you're feeding the original Crockpet diet and you add holistic total body support as well as calcium when you are cooking and some fats after it's cooled, you are at 100% complete and balanced for all life stages and then some. And the reason I say and then some is that it is so important, I think, to add in some sort of a nutritional supplement, because if your pet's ill, its body requires more nutrients, in specific B vitamins, vitamin A, things of that nature, omega-3 fatty acids, in order to repair the tissues and heal. So this is part of what's wrong with many of us. Many of us are obese, but frankly, we are undernourished. And I think this is what's happening with our pets as well. If they eat what the bag of food says, they become fat. And they still probably don't have enough of the micronutrients available to them. So that's what I have for you today. Again, I'm delighted to tell you Holistic Total Body Support will be back in our shelves the middle to the end of February. I have reformulated it so that it will be adequate for both dogs and cats. So that means there's extra taurine added for the dogs. And the other thing is that it's going to come into be available in a size that's enough for a 2-month supply for a 50-pound dog, which means, and at about somewhere around $60 for the 2-month supply. So again, it's a glandular-based supplement. I think it will be the best deal on the market. I'm looking at other stuff that's being launched right now, and you're at a $90 for a 30-day supply, and that's just really, really expensive. So I'm happy about that. If you are super confused about pet food and what to do and what to feed and how to make it match up for your pet's specific issues, the other thing I do is offer consultations, and many of you have taken care of it, taken advantage of that, both Ilsa and Lee that are on with me right now. It has been a big game changer for many pet owners. So I'll put a link down to where to get that consultation information in the comments below. So that's what I have for you this week. I am going to take 2 weeks off these broadcasts, but I'll put a couple of really oldies but goodies up. One is for the next 2 Mondays, one is a replay of a video I did about what you need to do for vaccinations, and then the other one will be on my take on what you should do for heartworm and flea prevention. So until next year, have a very, very happy year end. Give all your pets a big hug for me. We've got some really exciting changes coming up to make life simpler and easier for everyone. Many thanks. Take good care, and remember, your pet's best health truly does start in the bowl. I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, your pet's ally.